In my graduate studies, in preparation to be a Unitarian Universalist minister, in Clarkston, Georgia, which is just right outside of Atlanta. I live in Decatur, actually, and it takes me 15 minutes for me to get to Clarkston. There is a community of refugees from over 100 countries. The small little square mile of Clarkston, even though many refugees live right outside the Clarkston border also, but that square mile of that tiny little city is the most diverse square mile in the country. And I have been living in Atlanta or Decatur for 4 years, and I didn't really even know that that community was there. And part of it is so many people live there and aren't very mobile. Their children go to school, they're in elementary schools and middle schools and high schools. Many arrive not even speaking English. And in Clarkston, 98% of the children are not native English speakers. And many of them have only been in school within the 2 years of, and I guess the best way to say it is, they've only been in English-speaking schools for 2 years, the majority of that. So imagine coming and trying to accomplish a 5th grade standardized test when you've only been there a year. You're still learning English. So I wanted to tell you a little bit of the story of how that came to be and my own experience of working there. The story of crossing the Red Sea is quite poignant. As I mentioned, the Red Sea, this year, many people have drowned passing on boats. How interesting and sad it is that the number of people moving from Syria trying to get to Europe is a story of such old parts of our Judeo-Christian history and the history of ourselves as a humanity. So we are now in the percentage of our world population at the highest percentage of refugees or displaced persons. And I had to kind of look up at what's the difference between a displaced person and a refugee. And part of that is a formal status by the United Nations High Commission for Refugees. Someone can be displaced because there isn't work or there's poverty, but they haven't been processed formally to say, yes, you are officially a refugee, because maybe it's possible if something happens you could go back. To be considered an official refugee is one that you've had a background check. There are agreed international standards that you cannot go back to your country, or it will be a place where you will not be able to feed yourself or live or be worried about persecution for you and your children. So right now, with our world population is 7.4 billion, which is hard to imagine, there are 65.3 million displaced people. So I had to put this on a piece of paper, and I had to go to my old math and mark out the zeros to try to figure out what the percentage is of displaced persons of the population in our world. And I really thought my number was wrong, so I did a Google search. What's the percentage of refugees in the world population? And I got a number, and I thought, okay, it's a little different. And they were using the official refugee number, which is 1/3 of the displaced number. But overall, people who do not live where they want to live, where they call home, is 1 in 113 people of the world. I am shocked by that number. I cannot imagine that out of this room, we don't make up 113, but if we had a few more people in the room, it is possible that if we were a random sample, one person here would be a refugee from another country. So certainly, they might not be in your community, but many of them, thousands of them, were within an hour and a half from where we are now. And Clarkston has 5,000 refugees living in their city proper, or right outside, of a population of 8,000. So a really high percentage of them living there together. I did not know before doing this work, and I'm giving you a little bit of the background, and it might seem a little dry, but it still had such an emotional impact on me because I felt maybe, I guess, I've always been emotionally impacted by the reality of people needing to leave their home, but I didn't realize how desperate the situation is. When a refugee leaves their home country, they are not considered a refugee if they go from Syria to Italy. They're only considered a refugee if they go from Syria, using these as examples, to Italy, and then they're stuck there in a refugee camp because there's nowhere to go. So you have to be displaced twice in order to be able to be considered in the international system, to be then sent somewhere else to find a new home. On average, people who go into a refugee camp, wherever that place is they go, on average they're there for 17 years. So many grow up, marry, have children, and live there and try to make their life wherever you are. And we all need people to love and children to bear. It's hard to imagine to ask someone to put their life on hold. You make a life where you are. So many of those who want to be resettled somewhere else do have to go through a formal process. It usually takes years. And if you have a family, maybe a mother or 2 children, or maybe a husband who was injured in war, it's even harder to find a placement, which I can imagine that the work of trying to find people homes would be excruciatingly difficult. The total number right now that people are committed to this year in the world is that all the world's countries are committed to settling 800,000 840,000. I don't know why. 840,000. So that's less than 1 million. And so if there's 64.3 million, that's a pretty slim number. So many people, year after year, just stay in refugee camps and make those their homes. And I was so surprised. So you come into a new place you've been given permission to go somewhere. And you and your 3 children and your husband and your mother, however many people are part of your family, you need to buy your own ticket. But how do you have any money? So the country of which you are going to loans you the money. So generally the tickets are usually about $2,000. Just like me trying to go to Africa or to Syria, that's about how much it would cost. So a commercial rate, they're given a loan, then you have to repay it back in 1 year. How do you do that? So most people do end up defaulting, but then it's hard to make credit. So it's a crazy system. But for me, what was quite despairing is that I didn't realize how much the system kind of kept them in a position of poverty. So part of what I am aware of in my own work personally is that it is opening my heart to a different way of thinking of welcoming the stranger, of being aware that part of our human condition has been that people do leave their homes and always have, and here we are in a country that does welcome refugees and their families. And as we all know, we are in a climate right now of arguing whether or not that's safe, reasonable, and even necessary. But regardless, there are more refugees needing homes at this point, more than ever. And I am thankful and proud that my country still accepts so many refugees, and I hope that whoever comes to be in political power next will continue to do so. I say that in as broadly of a statement as I can make. As Unitarian Universalists, we have our collection of churches. We all have our own governance, but we are a part of an association of our churches, and we have our statement of response about refugee resettlement services, and we 100% support the work that our governments and that our congregations can do to support that in whatever ways they choose. There are actually 4 Unitarian Universalist churches that sponsor families. So through the work of their congregation, maybe not just in personal donations, but also by going into the community and asking for businesses and different people to donate things for schools or for furniture, they help support families that need additional support. When you come to a country, once you've borrowed the money for the airfare, the government provides all the things needed for 3 months. So after 3 months, then you need to cover all the rest. So a lot of congregations are, not just the Unitarian Universalist ones, but many support many families, will provide things needed to help to make sure the children get to school. So it is possible that we take on, as a small congregation, a whole family, but it's also something that might not be feasible. It might be that what we do as religious people is that we welcome the stranger in the ways that we can. So I have found in my particular work one that is challenging, difficult, rewarding, heartbreaking, and it reminds me that the sense of home, the stories that they speak about sorrow and grief and hope and resilience is one that we all know in our lives, but I cannot imagine being in their shoes. I grew up with a song in the 70s that was By the Rivers of Babylon. Do any of you remember that one? By the rivers of Babylon, where we sat down, and there we wept when we remembered Zion. Oh, the wicked carry us away from captivity. He required of us a song. How can we sing King Alpha's song in a strange land? I didn't really know the meaning behind that. I always loved the song, I loved the tune. But what I learned is that is a story directly from the time in which those slaves were in Egypt. There was a king that required of the slaves who were missing their homeland, and a way of a condescending, belittling way, said, sing us one of your lullabies that you would sing your children in your homeland. So they sat by the rivers of Babylon where they were slaves and tried to sing the song to King Alpha that they would have sung to their children. This is a song about sorrow, of not having a sense of a place to be fully yourself, to own even the lullabies that you would sing your children. What an incredibly sad song. And yet, the next lines, and we'll be singing it in a little while, is that the prayers that come from your mouth, the prayers that come from your actions, will redeem you and bring you back to who you are. I was reflecting after a day of being in Clarkston. I am connected to 4 families. And the families, one is from Sudan, 2 are from Nepal, and the other's from Burma. And when I met them all, I had to kind of figure out what I was going to do with these 9 months of being with these families. But they all had teenage children. And they were all girls but one boy. So I asked him, you willing to hang out with all the girls with us? So we kind of have a youth group. And I decided to be very intentional and to give them a space to not just come together and have some fun time, that's a little bit of it, but I wanted to be very intentional and say, what is it like to be here, a part of your own identity, and also a desire to be American? How do we do that? And some of the simple questions are, we see these things on TV, is this real? Is it possible? Does every person really go to college? Does every person really go on these grand vacations? Is it normal? Do people really get a car at 16? So there's these myths about what it is to be American. Still that sense of we are the golden promised land where everything is possible. And it's also helpful for me to say, no, those are myths. But this is what it can be for you to be American here, because I've tried to open up the conversation that they are as American as we are, those who grew up here, because they are a part of our land now. They are a part of who we have welcomed, and we will be changed by them too. I went home and I had a reflection from a day when sometimes you go and you do your work and you hold your head high, and you try to be there in times when you know you're looking at things that are heartbreaking, and then you go home and you feel them. You kind of have to keep the face on when you're doing the good work. And I wrote in my journal, today is a day I reflect on contrasts, the contrast between us. We learn as children to differentiate ourselves and those we are connected to from the other people that we don't know. Such a differentiation is a survival technique. It's inherent in us from our oldest part of our DNA and our biology carried through millions of years. To know who was the other was a way to survive. And we teach our children our language so that we can be in community. That community molds us, and the language is the common bond with our family and our tribe. This language expresses our deepest emotions. And we teach our children to sort things by color and size and texture. These distinct categories of things are clear. The blue goes in the blue bucket. The red goes in the red bucket. These contrasts serve us, and they give our lives order and safety. And the nuance and the complexities come later. The shades of color blend from red to red-orange, and orange-red, and orange. Do you remember the crayon boxes that used to have those categories? And now they don't have them anymore. They have these weird other names. It's kind of like nail polish or lipstick. It's really silly. As we grew older, those distinctions faded. And the contrast of my life to the families I work with now, each week are so stark. I have plenty, and they have barely anything. And just this past week, I helped put a new battery in the smoke detector on the second floor of this apartment. It was incessantly chirping, even more so than the ones I've had in my house. This one was like every 45 seconds. They didn't even know where the noise was coming from or even how to fix it. They literally had just arrived 3 weeks ago on a plane from a refugee camp in Sudan. So fixing the incessant chirping was not exactly the highest priority on their list. So the next day I came, I brought a step stool, and I brought some batteries, and I brought my toolbox just in case I needed a screwdriver. So I clomped upstairs, trying to just help with something small to put a new battery in. Well, as I was on the second floor, I saw in the bedroom upstairs that there was only one mattress on the floor, and everyone else was sleeping on pallets on the floor. This was for a family of 4. And the only furniture in the house at that point was a small table and 2 chairs. And that was it. I guess it was a start. There are walls, there's a ceiling, there's food at the time. They're protected from the rain. But the contrast to my life was intense. And my emotional reaction was intense. So I am learning at this point, I write, to see beyond the difference of what I have and what I know and what I want to share. As I came home today, I am also seeing our sameness. The children like to play and laugh. And these 3 children don't have a mother. And I can offer hugs and a tray of muffins that we made together that day in their kitchen. I brought every single thing needed, from a pan to the measuring cups to the stirring spoon, from the ingredients, and that was a way I could come and give a gift without it being something that would be just doling out charity. I see their need for safety, connection, and belonging. I am not in contrast to them. I am like them. I am also a person reaching with my heart and my hands to them. They are teaching me as much as I am teaching them how to be American. So these three kids and I are moving from the contrast of other to a friend. We are moving beyond the difference of our native tongues to share a language of smiles and laughter. We are letting go of the distinct differences between us, and we are learning to be in relationship even without a common language. This utmost revelation of my open heart and open mind is my spiritual practice, and it is strengthened by this work. This is where the holy resides in me, and I ask with hope that they will let me walk alongside the holy in them. Tearing up a little thinking about it. So our work as religious people is also to allow ourselves to welcome the people that we have not related to in the past. I looked up in your county, you're in Lumpkin County, right? There are 34 families in Lumpkin County who have been resettled here. I don't even know where they would be. Does anyone know of any resettled families around them in their neighborhoods? They're most likely in apartment complexes that might have very low rent. They might not have cars. They might be walking to grocery stores nearby, but most likely they have children in elementary school or in middle school. So I have found that my own spiritual practice as a religious person in relation to anyone who needs my advocacy, and especially those who are seeking a new and safe haven in my own home, in my own city, in my own country, that I do what I can when I see them in front of me, and I do more than just saying hello. That I do my best to be their companion and to walk alongside them in moments where it might not be clear what they need. So it's important for me to ask and to do something. Take the time to stop and say, what can I do during this hour to help you? So I urge you, perhaps maybe to look around and see if you recognize any of the people that might be living amongst you. And certainly we do all of our best to help anyone in front of us who is in need. But I imagine they're in your midst and just you haven't noticed them. So I want to close this with a moment to come back to the Spirit for me. May the compassion that I have felt open in me be one that you also find in yourself, and may the spirit of love and creativity flow in you and in us together as a community, supporting us in this important work of just opening our hearts to the others. May I see the holy in you, may you see the holy in me, and may we see the holy in the stranger in front of us. Amen.